The idea, I wrote a little essay to Bellarmont about an alternative or manifestation of a Vedanta center, and outlined an idea to them that had been bothering me and gestating in me for a long time, about a Vedanta center that didn't present as any particular religion, and a place where, like in Vivekananda's vision when he first came to the United States, where a place where a Christian could become a better Christian, and a Hindu could become a better Hindu, and a Muslim a better Muslim. And I looked around and I thought, well, we really haven't touched that potential yet. And so I wanted to do this experiment, and I was quite surprised when they gave me permission to do that, actually. And gave me 2.5 years leave of absence. Actually, 2 years was what was agreed on. It turned into 2.5. And we went, and now we've got a new small group, but a small group of folks that meet in Lafayette, Colorado. They've rented a home out there. We have a brahmachari there already who's kind of doing the morning pujas and the afternoon aratis, and they're carrying on. And I went to Bellarmont in March because that was the end of my 2-year leave of absence, and then got posted in Santa Barbara. And so they're carrying on out there now under the auspices of Swami Chidbrahmananda up in Washington, Seattle, Washington. As soon as I say Washington, D.C. automatically comes out, but up in Seattle. So that's what I'm back from, and full of life, actually very ready to be back here, very excited to just continue the journey, just continue forward. If it's a journey, I don't know, I feel like it's more jumping back and forth over a period, but I guess that can be a journey too. It's been a great undertaking, and one of my favorite things actually is really coming to light, that spiritual life is just this continually bumping into newness, getting new insight, getting a new, I don't know what you would call it, a new view of what the world is around you. And I have to say that in the last 27 years of my mostly failed attempts, things just keep unfolding. I find the grace of the beloved to be one of the most powerful, what would you say, what's that word? This is a new thing too. I turned 61 this year, and words decided to leave. When you put two chemicals together and then you add a catalyst, there it is. A catalyst. That grace is one of the most beautiful catalysts for spiritual growth, for instant spiritual growth. It really depends on just two things, which you already know, and which are things that are themselves a matter of grace. That's your earnestness and your sincerity in the effort. How bad do you want to know these things? With the ultimate requirement being more than anything else in a very literal way. And so part of that is beginning to understand where in this world of reality we reside. Or an easier way of asking that question is, who are you? But where in this reality are you? One of the things I have said in almost every lecture in the last 2 years, and I continue to say it because it was one of the most marvelous thoughts that occurred to me and has continued to unfold, and has unfolded even as recent as the last week for me, that I'm hoping to be able to share with you. And it's this idea that we're always interested in the real, keeping it real, and the fist bump. That's, at least I've seen that happen. That's never happened to me yet. But that whole notion, but this notion of approaching God and understanding what it is to be real, what it is to be authentic. There's lots of things that have kind of grown up around that that are important in that arena, and I'm hoping to be able to lay those out in somewhat ordered way. But if tradition keeps alive, I'll only finish 2/3 of this lecture anyway before everybody's ready for lunch. But I want to jump in. I went up to Krishnamurti's place up in Ojai about 2 weeks ago. I really enjoyed the atmosphere at that place. It's a very rustic kind of old country home with high ceilings and the exposed beams, but everything is white. All the furniture is white, all the bookshelves are white, just white, floors are white, carpets are white. And you just walk in and I went with my friend Gloria from the center in Santa Barbara, and I just told her immediately, I said, oh my God, I just feel like I'm taking a mental shower. This place just has such a cleanness to it, such an openness to it. So I was instantly curious as to what this Krishnamurti was about. I really hadn't really gotten into his stuff, so I went to the bookshop there and I asked the man, which is kind of a funny thing. I did all the wrong things. One, I introduced myself as a Swami, not realizing that's sort of a snubbed thing in Krishnamurti's world, and which is always great. I love getting a response other than what you expect. Somebody's like, not nice. And then I bought a book thinking, can you give me a book that encapsulates Krishnamurti? And of course, the first thing I read in that book is that books are unnecessary. You shouldn't read it. You should either read none of them or you should read as many as possible to get a bunch of ideas fighting in your head. But I found all of that rather interesting because he was down on gurus, down on institutions, down on organizations, and down on books. And yet there I was at his institution, in his organization, buying one of his books to hear what he taught. And I thought, well, I just went around this all wrong, So I dug into the material because I wanted to see what he was getting at. And it's not that he doesn't like books and gurus. He just has a caveat about looking for things outside of yourself and for finding things in the world that you think can add something to you. That is our original mistake, is that whole idea. It is the whole story of the Garden of Eden, which is another one of my favorite things to touch upon. Because in that story, I would propose, let's put it that way, I would propose that that's not a one-time story about how a world began, how a material world began, because I don't believe in a material world. I believe in a conscious world, a world of consciousness, that we are actually in the mind of God here. And that was Eve's whole process. It was a 3-step process. You remember, I think I went over this once when I was here a few years ago, that when she was in that garden, she looked out at that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. So I did a lot of thinking, well, what is a fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? But it turns out to be egoism, right? That is what ego is. It is thinking that you are separate and apart from God, that you have a thought separate and apart from God, and are able to have opinions and movements separate and apart from God, which is humorous at some level, not so humorous on another. But then she went to the second step. The second step is that she saw that it was beautiful, right? She stepped into her senses and saw the outside world and saw it as a thing in itself, as being beautiful. The second step she takes is that she thought that she would like to take it. She wanted to have it, right? She thought that it would make her whole, which was the third step, that it would make her like God. It would fulfill her. And you see, this is a looping story that's going on in every moment, because within you is the Garden of Eden, is paradise, is the kingdom of God, is the divine beloved waiting in the drawing room of your heart to meet you, to commune with you. And grace is the most beautiful and fastest way of touching that, of going, because it gives you permission to enter that room. Because you can't enter that room if you've got any sense of insecurity about being there, any sense of guilt or shame about the way your life is going, or any sense of doubt, that those are all ego products, and the ego can't fit through that door. And so either you have to become perfect as a human being, or you have to perfectly trust grace, lay everything down at the door. Because this world that we're in cannot offer us anything. It cannot give us anything from outside. You are self-contained. The entire universe is within you, and I don't mean that metaphorically. It's there within you. And the divine beloved is you when manifesting through an ego and through a history, and all of your samskaras and all of your lenses of mind, that you have this pure love that's behind mind, behind body, that's just brilliantly shining equally in all directions at all times in a marvelous way. It's the thing that gives us any inspiration we've ever touched. And that when it comes out the front side, it's got a name, Swami C. And I've changed it. Nobody's ever called me God accidentally, right? Because I have completely and utterly disguised myself, even forgotten it completely. Which you have to do, right? We created this game for ourselves, for whatever reason, this puzzle, potentially called a play, right? Which was last week's lecture. But this notion of just being here in the moment, right? Being here in the moment. And so what is it that we're experiencing? Right? The thing that I've said in every lecture for the last 2 years, to come back and touch on that, is the fact that nothing you have experienced is real. And I don't mean that in a metaphoric way either. I mean that as a way, if you pay attention to the way that your body-mind works, you will see that you have never touched or seen or heard or tasted or smelled anything that was real. Because everything that you, well, I always use a light, that's my favorite, so I'll go back to that. When you look at that light, right, where does it go? It goes into the eye, supposedly, right? And it hits a bunch of cones at the back of the eye, and then it gets encoded into information. So you, as the observer of your mind, have never seen that light, right? That light, the mind takes that information that comes through the nerves and creates a symbol of what that light is to you based on that information. And everything you have ever tasted, touched, heard, or smelled had to go from here to here, and the thing itself did not do that, right? Just the information comes. And we only assume that there's an external world. There's only one problem with that, is that all of the enlightened folks who are kind of kicking us in the rump, trying to get us to move forward, are saying, no, there is nothing out there. There is no external world. It's only internal. Boy, I'm already diverging, but excited, so I'll just keep going. And so we understanding that we have never studied anything but a symbol within our own mind really tells you that you can only ever know your own mind, regardless of how many external things you study. Right? Big quote around that. And so to understand this world of symbols and this world of meaning, that this is why Ramakrishna made that point that I think was fairly new by him, that it's not that this world is purely an illusion. It's not. It's all symbols, but symbols that are pointing at a reality that's behind them, a reality that the body mind can't see. Right? We ourselves can't fit into this world, which is another part of that lecture. Anyway, let me get back to our lecture today, this one. See, I get these ideas that swirl, and they're all linked together, and I just, and one comes right after the other, and pretty soon the lecture's over, and I'm not done with the introduction. So let me read something to you here from Krishnamurti in a book called The First and Last Freedom. He says, symbols then are indispensable, but symbols, as the history of our own and every other age makes so abundantly clear, can also be fatal. Consider, for example, the domain of science on the one hand, the domain of politics and religion on the other. Thinking in terms of and acting in response to one set of symbols, we have come, in some small measure, to understand and control the elementary forces of nature. Thinking of and in terms of acting in response to another set of symbols, this is the politics and religious ones, we use forces as instruments of mass murder and, this is the first one. Instruments of mass murder and collective suicide. So these are the two ways that we use these symbols, either rightly or wrongly, right? If we know these symbols are all pointing at the divine, then we can learn an amazing amount of things from of God, from a tree or from a rock, or literally from just sitting and asking the universe, which is the amazing thing. Even Jesus says, ask and it will be given unto you, added unto you. And so it's amazing that we don't ask much. Which is something I learned in my Colorado experiment, actually, because I went there with nothing. I had no money. And when I arrived, after paying for everything, I had $76 in my account that night. And I had put my shrine together in the room I was renting in this professor's house, a wonderful man, actually. And I sat there at that shrine that night, and I was like, well, here I am. I have no idea what to do. I have no idea how to go about this, because I don't want to build my castle. I don't want to build my idea, because I feel like this came from inspiration from you. And I had to sit there and learn how to communicate beyond the symbols, right? In prayer, you can ask lots of things, right? But never in my life had I been in a situation, believe it or not, this is very embarrassing as a monk to say this, in the 27 years, never had I been in a position where I actually needed real world help from the divine. Things just always kind of went on. But now I was, for the first time, in an impossible situation. No idea where to go, what to do, or how I was going to get anything beyond my $79. Right? And so I sat there and just put it out there to Mother, and told her, I said, I've got $79, not complaining. I can probably have plenty to eat for the next week or so. But if you don't want me to, hitchhike back to Hollywood, and you want this thing to actually go on, I just want you to know that. And consistently through the next 2.5 years, money showed up. I never asked for money, never put out a notice for money, never even asked Mother for money. I just always told her what my records were telling me. And she just took care of all of those things. I just went and asked, or not even asked, just presented to her the situation. And I didn't keep track of how much money came in, but I mean, it was my rent, which was $1,000 a month, and my, internet and my health insurance and all of the things that I needed, and everything was covered for 2.5 years without ever having to ask, or without ever having to panic. And so this asking, or this presenting to the divine, it's a very real thing. And I'm amazed that it took me 25 years in the monastery to even have that idea occur to me, because I had never stepped out into an impossible situation. I never had needed to do it. And this time it came and it happened, and I learned wonderful things. And so I encourage you, if you want to have a direct communication with the divine, it is possible. It is for you. It doesn't take much more than just you being as silent as you can be. Go out to, there's a number of ways of doing it. You can just go directly to Mother in your mind, or to the divine, or your own chosen ideal in your mind, and just lay out your heart. Just open up everything that's in there. And on top of it, put a little note with your question or with your concern or your wonder in it, and present it to the Mother, and then just simply be quiet. Don't try and cognate, don't sit there and analyze, don't try and anticipate what the answer might be, don't try and hear something. Because Mother doesn't speak in sentences, she doesn't speak in words, she speaks in knowings, that suddenly you just know exactly what needs to be done, or what is to be done, or what you should do, or whatever's happening. And so in that silence, I got that from Ramakrishna, because the second day that I was at my shrine, I kid you not, after having prayed all those things the night before, I realized that I didn't know how to hear. Again, kind of shocking after 25 years in a monastery to not know how to hear the very divine beloved of your heart. And so I went back to the shrine. I said, I laid out a bunch of questions to you last night, and I don't need to repeat them, I know, but I don't, frankly, I don't know how to hear you. I don't know how you're going to tell me that information, I've never actually really felt like I heard you, except in those little nudgy ways that we run through life. And I was quite surprised, because the next morning, as I was sitting up and doing my gospel reading as my morning practice, the very first thing I read that morning from Ramakrishna, he said, "That which arises in pure mind is the voice of the divine." Right? And I thought, well, that's fascinating. And so pure mind, anytime the scripture uses the words pure, it means the absence of me and mine. It's always very helpful just to swap that out when you read the scriptures, because we'll associate it with all different kinds of manifestations of me and mine, but it's actually the me and mine itself. The mind would not have a thought in it if you had no me and mine concept. Me and mine is the most unnatural thing for God to think of, because God is universal. He's not a single point. He's not a reference. He is every part of it, just like when you dreamed last night. Everything in that dream was you, regardless how much like a mountain it looked like, or how much like an ocean it felt like. You made it, right? You created that entire world of your dream, and yet for some reason you only picked a particular perspective to enter into that dream and to experience it. And you picked a particular perspective, and then you also created a body from which to experience that dream. And why did you do that? Well, who knows why we did that? But part of the problem is that you can't get into your dreams. Your body's asleep in the bed, no way to get this big chunky thing into a dream. Can't go there. So you have to create a thought of yourself, and you have to enter into that dream as the thought of yourself, and experience that world as a thought. And you believe you're there, right? Perhaps I don't have to say that. You believe you're there. You're running from the gang in New York chasing you, and suddenly you're in, a butterfly body and flying up into some flower, which oddly enough you never question, right, at all. That's one of the examples I use for renunciation. When people tell me they can't renounce, or how difficult renunciation is, I say that's an absurdity. Renunciation is your nature. You do it every night when you enter into a dream. You forget your wife, your children, your money, your job, your bank accounts, your cars, your body. You forget everything to not even having a thought about it. You don't even miss it. At no point in your dream do you sit there and think, if I could just get back into that sleeping body, that that beautiful thing in that bed. It never even occurs to you. So every night you renounce the world better than any monk to date, more completely than you can think possible. So you're well versed and well practiced in your renunciation. So don't ever, ever, ever think that you're not. Now, let me try and drag this all back here to our book by Krishnamurti. So this world of symbols that we live in, he says that the problem with our world of symbols is that we take them to be real and we misunderstand them and misuse them. He says that the difference between the symbols for like science and politics and whatnot is that those ones we're constantly modifying. As we find out more experientially from this material world, we keep modifying those symbols to adjust to them. And he said, what is this weird thing that we've done with religion where we've set the symbols up and they stay there, and they haven't changed, and they haven't been modified based on our experience and based on our growth and based on our learning. And so he makes this point. You can agree with it or not. It's not a scripture, so we can fight if we want to. He says that this is the problem with our symbols, that we've just accepted these stories and these narratives about reality based on what we think is reality and not understanding at all what these symbols mean, because we don't even know what we are. We don't even know, well, just that. We don't know what we are, who we are, how we are, nothing about ourselves. And it's one of our biggest handicaps in this world, right? Because you're born, you step into the world, and almost before you get your first sentence out, every adult you know is leaning over you and saying, hey, what do you want to become when you grow up? What are you going to be? You want to be a fireman? You want to be a policeman? I don't know why those are always the first ones, but they are, So the biggest needs, I guess. But, we're asked from the beginning what we're going to be. And so that's where our mind goes for the rest of our days, at least until we go through, finish college. And then we walk out the door with the degree and we're like, help, what do I do with this? Where do I go now? Because we still don't know who we are. Wouldn't it be more delightful for a child if you had been 5 years old, instead of having somebody come say, hey, what are you going to be when you grow up? Which you don't even know what that means, hardly. Instead, they turned to you and said, you're made of pure love. And anything that you do with pure love is going to make you happy. Anything that you think or teach or act on, as long as it's wise, is going to make you happy. So those two things you have to understand. You're loving and you're wise. And those two things, if you use those as your touchstone for life, anything that you do is going to be fulfilling to you. A fulfilling life is never a target. It's always a byproduct. It's a byproduct of manifesting who you are in the moment, because there is no timeline. There is only this moment, and there's only ever been this moment. And so here we are, right? We can't have a purpose that gets fulfilled in a sentence, because there's no room in this microscopic sliver of a moment for a past and a future. Right? There's no room here for it. So it's not what you're going to do in this life. It's how you're going to do it that's going to be the most important thing. Do you do it according to your nature? Right? And we'll touch on that here in a moment. But he talks about these symbols being inadequate because we don't update them and we don't redo them. And he then basically wants to throw everything away, absolutely clear that table off. He says even the best cookbook is no substitute for even the worst meal. The fact seems sufficiently obvious, and yet throughout the ages the most profound philosophers, the most learned and acute theologians have constantly fallen into the error of identifying their purely verbal constructs with facts, and into the yet more enormous error of imagining that symbols are somehow more real than what they stand for. Right? And this is not just the problem of these supposed theologians and whatnot, it's your and my problem also. We assign the absolute reality to this symbol of a chair, right? An absolute reality to this symbol of the divine manifestation, the thinking that is the symbol of the divine isness. Which wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that nasty little pill of me and mine that you dropped into that tender, placid ocean one day, the ocean of consciousness. And boy, have you ever put vinegar in baking soda? That thing, the reaction you get? That's why you have a noisy mind. It's not because you can't control it. It's because you've created a me and mine that you're trying to use to control it. So what you've done is jumped into the swimming pool and now you're trying to slap down all the waves. Why can't I do this? God, I can't meditate at all. What's happening, right? It's because you're in the mind thinking that you need to control the mind in some way, when all you need to do is remove that pill of me and mine, stand off as the self, and observe this active mind. Don't care about it. Caring about it puts you right back in the water, right? Thinking about it, being concerned about it, puts you right back in the pool. So don't. Just watch it go crazy. And know that the only reason you can see that it's moving is because you, by inference, are standing in a place that's not. If you were noisy, you wouldn't hear the noisy mind, right? If you're, gosh, you go out to these modern restaurants now that, I don't know what they're doing with it, but there's no carpets and no anything. It's just like this cacophony of noise, and you're sitting there with somebody across a small table, paying an enormous amount for a roll, and you can't even hear each other, right? You're just screaming back and forth. And this is kind of what it's like, well, I won't say that. I'll say it because it's funny. That's kind of the experience of being a religious lecturer these days. It's like we're sitting in a cacophony of symbols clanging into each other, everybody having their set of ideas, their set of perspectives, and we're trying to yell out into this noisy world the truth. Say, no, thinking that even my words are somehow truth, or my words are somehow helpful. This is where humility has to come from, where you come to understand that as soon as it comes out of your mouth, it's no longer true, right? Because God can't be caught in a word. Truth can't be caught in a word. And Paul says this in his letters to the Corinthians. He said, the Spirit, not the letter. And we have such trust through Christ toward God, not that we're sufficient of ourselves to think of anything as being from ourselves, but our sufficiency is from God, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives. The Spirit gives life, right? And so this notion that we have to change our whole perspective, because we are not a person of boundary. We are not a person of limit. We're not a person. It's one of the most shocking things I read in I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Just one sentence blew my mind. He says, there's none such thing as a person. And I was like, well, I got some evidence here, right? But there's not such thing as a person. And that seems incredible until you sit with it, until you just start observing. You don't have to use your mind, and actually it's impossible to use your mind. This is what the illusion is, that we think that we can use our mind to analyze and arrive at a truth. How could you do that? How would that be possible? Because the one who's thinking, the noisemaker in the mind, and the one who's not, who's listening to the mind, are sourced in the same person. What is your mind going to tell you that you haven't already gotten? But we play this game, is that we put our attention on it, we sit there and argue it out, and somewhere in that concentration, that which is arises, as it always does within us. And we then immediately think, oh, that was the result of my great cognition there, and I arrived at that. But we understand from, I don't remember who it was who came up with that word eureka. He was in the bathtub and something happened. And there's okay, that guy, right? Eureka, right? He had a realization. And this is why we call our spiritual growth this imagined goal, which is also a problem. Gosh, there's so many lectures here. But we have this imagined goal. If you do your practice with the idea that some magical day in some imagined future you're going to get everything you ever wanted and be super happy, you're going to be chasing for a very long time, because God is not on a timeline. This moment is your realization, and it's already done. It's already finished within you. It's sitting right here in the shrine of the heart. It's where all the sages have touched that divine reality. But somehow we are up here. Why are we up here, right? Why are we up here? Because this is where the world is. This is where the whole universe is, right? Because we just talked about the fact that it's all created in here through the senses, that you've taken this information and arranged this imagined world that you live in, right? And so to think that we're going to use this world in that way to arrive at something else or to come to something new is the fallacy. It's like this is the world of the change, of constant, unrepeating change, right? And God can't fit in that world in the same way that you can't fit in your dream, right? God can't fit in this dream. So what has he done? The exact same thing that you do when you enter into your dream. He creates a thought of himself. Creates a thought of himself, and that thought enters the universal mind with an idea of a particular, that nasty me and mine. And as soon as that thought enters the universe, woof, bam, it's on fire, right? Everything's moving, constant, unrepeating change. And that's where you live, as a thought of yourself. And what do we name that thought? Ego, right? So you have created a thought of yourself, you, the divine beloved, have created a thought of yourself and entered into the dream. And just like you do again at night, you believe that self, that thought of you, to be what you are, right? But the whole time, the enlightened self is behind the scene, absolutely able to be, there's no word for it, uncovered, discovered, learned, seen, saw, whatever, realized. That self is always there, right? Just like your body is always there when you're dreaming, but there's no thought of it because you believe yourself to be the thought. And so that's what's happened to us in this world. We've created a thought of ourself, which doesn't have any other definition except being a wave, right? Just being a wave of consciousness. One of the things that Ramakrishna saw in his enlightenment, right? This infinite ocean of light, of awareness, of a consciousness, with these waves of bliss that were rushing toward him with such a ferocity, they threatened his very sense of I, his very sense of being. And then he says it went beyond words. At that point, nothing more could be said. That there was no room for words, because he became the moment. He became the universal, right? So Meister Eckhart goes on and he talks about this, about not being the letter, right? Not being the symbol, not being the word, but being the reality, right? We sang in that song in John there at the beginning. He has the same paradox that we run into in Shankara. You know, that idea of that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, right? So you've got both parts. You've got the Word was God, right? The unmanifest, not a thought in mind, and the Word was with God, right? This changing world, when you became the symbol for word, or one of the symbols, one of the infinite number of symbols for word that point at God. So you've stepped into this world, and he's saying, one must not always think so much about what one should do, but rather what one should be. Our works do not ennoble us. We must ennoble our works, right? Because our works are what? They're manifestation, they're symbols. And those symbols aren't going to do anything to us. It's how we work. That's the important thing. And this is something I really wish somebody had told me at any point in my life, other than when I was 60, a little bit late, was that I spent so much time and so much worry about what I was going to do with my life. You know, I ended up being a computer scientist, which was the last thing I did. That wasn't even on my list. I did that actually for a completely different reason. I was going to be a missionary to Germany when I was in seminary. And they told me to get a computer science degree so that I could go to Germany on a permanent visa. So I did that. Well, then I left that religion and was holding a degree in computer science as somebody who probably should have been an art history major, you know, just walking around thinking, why is my life not fulfilling? Well, why can't I find anything that I feel like I belong to? Why is everything always leaving me hungry, right, in this world? And this is the answer to that. It's not what you're doing. That is irrelevant for a fulfilling life, for knowing the divine. It's how you do it, right? It's how you do it. And I'm going to let him tell us here how to do it. He says, wisdom consists in doing the next thing you have to do with your whole heart and finding delight in doing it. That is the biggest secret for a fulfilling life that I could ever give you. Is that this morning, I don't care what you do. You can be a dog walker. You can be a busboy. You can be unemployed. You can anything. Get the point? It doesn't matter what you're doing. But if you're doing that with your whole heart, applying your Sat Chit Ananda to it, applying your divine nature to it, it will always be fulfilling, right? I remember one of my happy days when I was a little kid. I was like 11 years old, and I discovered I filled a Frisbee with water, and the yard was full of dandelions, and I was picking the dandelions, and I was, you know, separating their stems, peeling their stems, and then sitting them in the water. And when you put a peeled dandelion stem in water, it kinks up real tight. And it's really cool when you're 11. You're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Science. And so I was creating these things. And so I created a whole Frisbee of them. And I carried that Frisbee in and gave it to my mother. Wow, what a memory. I was 11. That was 50 years ago. And I could still start crying, well, mostly because I'm just a baby in that way. But I could start crying thinking about my mother's reaction and my pride and my happiness at having done something. It was how I did it. What did I do? I ruined a bunch of flowers and put them in water, right? You couldn't do anything with them but look at them in the Frisbee. And yet, for her, she was just mesmerized. Oh my God, how did you, what? That was so, right? Just beaming, just happy. And so this is the biggest secret to your life. You can be peeling dandelions and find it fulfilling. It's just a matter of you knowing who you are. Remembering when you were 5, that person that came to you and said, hey, you know you are made of something so amazing called pure love. And the more of it you give and share, the more fulfilled you're going to be. And if you do it wisely, and what does wise mean? It means with your whole heart and with your, what did he say here? Doing it with your whole heart and finding delight in doing it, right? Just not, one of the things the nuns teach us up in Santa Barbara that they've taught me, or trying to teach me up there, is that we don't do what we like what we do. And of course, coming from a nun, that's very, but in the heart, I understood. I was like, why decide that you don't like to do something? That's an arbitrary statement from within, right? I know that because growing up, I would rather stick peas in my ears than eat them at the dinner table. I can remember our dining table was in the laundry room, so you know how rich we were. And I would sit there, I didn't want to eat those green beans, and I had been sitting there for like an hour and a half. Everybody else had left the table, and my dad was only checking in. Have you eaten those beans yet? You're not getting up until those beans are gone. And then I was like, oh God, I'm not going to eat these beans. So I spied the laundry detergent box right behind me, and I just took those beans one at a time and shoved them through that little spout into the laundry detergent box, right, rather than eat those beans. But the weird thing about it, and the whole point of that ridiculous story, is that I love green beans now. One of my favorite things, peas. I love peas. One of my favorite things. You have to spice them in a certain way, but they're wonderful, right? And so your likes and your dislikes, we take them as laws. Oh no, I don't do that. I don't like to do that. Well, that's absurd. Why did you decide not to like doing that? There's somebody out there who's loving it, right? Somebody out there enjoying it. So that means you have the potential in you to delight in whatever you're doing. And this is the secret to having a fulfilled life, is to delight in what you do and to do it with your whole self, to throw yourself into it. Meister Eckhart has 2 more little points here that I wanted to read. They're different, but he says, why do you prate of God? Prate means rattle on. Probably talking to me. Why are you rattling on about God? He says, whatever you say of God is untrue, right? Because you cannot capture the divine. You cannot put a phrase, right? Why is that? Because in order to actually know God means that you have to step out of this dream. You have to stop using your mind in order to find him. You say, whoa, stop using my mind to find him. What about this, and this, and this practice? Like, yes, no. What you have to do is stop using your mind because you can't find him in mind. He's never the result of a thought. He's never the result of an understanding, and you will never get an understanding of who you are. Because for me to tell you who you are, I have to break 3 triads that God cannot fit into. Your mind cannot conceive of something that is not one of the triads of triads, right? Triad number 1, past, present, future, right? Every sentence you have is potentially involved with past, present, and future. God is the present. There's not such thing as the past, not such thing as the future. We did another lecture on that. We're spending all of our time jumping back and forth because your past is what? It's all of your attachments. And your future is what? All of your desires that the present, when viewed through your past, creates. And you have to come up with a plan for how to bring that thing into the present, right? So the past is you holding on to stuff. The future is you hoping for stuff, right? Or hoping not for stuff. And so we spend all of our time in life jumping back and forth between our past and our future, our attachments and our desires. And what are we jumping over? Our is. that which we are, and the only place we have ever been. We have never been in the past. You can't go there now. You can't go back and bring me the dandelions I'm talking about, right? You can't go into the future. We are always here because this place is what? It's what we are. This moment is not separate from us. This moment is because we sustain the universe in it. Right? This moment is because we hold everything in this moment. We are that, the I am, which is the name of God in the Old Testament, which is this present moment, right? I am means the present. This is, I is, right? So I just call it ising. So why do you rattle on about God if you know that whatever you say is untrue? That's exactly very important. Use this in your meditation. One, you've only got the present, and it's going to be in this present that you realize God. And so if you know you're going to realize God, because Thakur promised you that you're going to realize God, borrow on it. That's what I tell people. Borrow on it, right? You know you're going to have all that joy, so enjoy it now. Enjoy the potential of having that joy, right? When you sit there in your shrine right now, God is never going to be nearer to you than he is right now. He can't get any nearer to you. You're in him, made of him. Just like in your dream last night, everything in your dream was made by you. Everything was you, and yet you had names for all of it, and you saw it all as separate from you. But once you know, imagine dreaming, knowing that you're dreaming. What a freedom there'd be. There'd be no story. You would just know, I can manifest anything in here. This is crazy, right? This is what the potential of your isness is. To walk through this world knowing that you're dreaming. We have lots of weird examples about it. How many people in the scriptures of the world have we heard that were walking on water, right? How many people in these scriptures around the world have we read that were parting seas or parting rivers and walking through them? You know? All these things that we're told about are not because they were miracles. It's because the people that were doing them simply knew the nature of the world they were living in. They knew this is a dream. This is not material. That's why we don't know what material is. That's why science doesn't have a definition for it. That's why every time we go look for the source of it, you know, how many times in my life, and at least 5 times now, I think, they found the particle. This is the smallest particle. And every time they find that one smallest particle, they're like, well, no, something in our data is implying there's something else out there. And so 10 years goes by, we get the technology to get that much smaller. By God, look, there is a smaller thing out there. But our data said indicates there's something else going on, right? And so the sages early on figured that out right away. They're like, if we go out there for truth, it just keeps bifurcating. Every one answer you come up with, you get 5 more questions. And it's going to go on like that ad infinitum. Why? Because it's unreal. It changes. It doesn't even stay what it is. I gave up on science completely when I read this article in the New York Times about quantum physics, where it said that they had managed to put something, I don't even know what it was, something into a state of moving and non-moving at the same time. And I was like, okay, church is easier. I need less faith to believe in religion now than I need to believe in science. You're right. They tell you these things. In that article, it posited that this reality that we live in is like an ocean of black goo in which nothing takes form until it's observed, and within which time travels forwards and backwards simultaneously. I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. Right? Vedanta has it much more beautifully. At least there it's an ocean of light with waves of bliss. I was like, I'll go to that one. We're going to hang out there. Take that home. Right? So I tell you the truth. Any object that you have in your mind, however good, will be a barrier between you and the inmost truth. Right? And what's he telling you? He's telling you that if you have any thought about your realization and what you will be, you're wrong. And if you have any notion of what you are that you can put into a word or a description or a picture or a thought, you're wrong. Right? So when you sit in your meditation, stop trying to do anything. Primarily, you could use all the reasonings we just gave you, or you could just follow the one that Thakur says, that you're not the doer, you know, which was actually the impetus for this whole investigation that I'm sharing for me, was because I just read that one day and I was like, God, how many times does he say that in the gospel? You know, I have to go ask AI later. But how many times does he say, you are not the doer? And somehow, every time you sit down to do your practice, you're doing, right? I'm doing this and I'm doing that. No, you're not. Stop making that effort. Open up to the truth, right? How do we open up to the truth? Be sincere and earnest there, and then take grace. Grace is the shortcut. It's the way to cut the knot. You know, they talk about that Gordian knot that couldn't be untied, and the guy just took a knife to it or a sword, sliced it. Grace is that sword, right? It's through your acceptance of grace that you can have this very moment your realization, right? But what does that grace cost, as it were? Your complete surrender of desire, right? Holy Mother says you can have your realization this moment if you want it, right? We always think that, oh, this is something that God's working out in secret somewhere, and someday he'll give me my realization on my birthday or something, right? That it's going to magically happen. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that, right? You can have this infinite grace the moment you face it with infinite humility, right? The moment you realize you can't do it, the moment you've tried everything and worn yourself out. Swami Chidbrahmananda told me this one time. I asked him about this. Why do we have to do all this stuff, for realization? It's like, why? Why do I have to dress in an orange curtain? Why do I have to do all of this? And he says, he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, so you get exhausted. He says, and when you collapse in your exhaustion, then Mother will give you the gift, right? When you know that there's nothing you can do, that you cannot get this in any possible way, it's not the result of an action. Your realization is the only effect with no cause. The scriptures say that. I would tell you where if I could remember, right? It's the effect with no cause. And so when you sit, the potential of your realization is there. It's already there, actually. You're just not paying attention to the party. You're looking at your cell phone, right? Your personal mind. You've got it all right there. You're doing this. The whole party's going on around you, and you're just like, oh my God, did you see that? Completely unaware of what's happening. And so in this moment, if you sit to know God, and you stop thinking that you don't know God, right? That's one of the other big secrets of life. Sri Nisargadatta says, he says, do you not realize that it's your quest for happiness itself that's preventing you from being happy? I was like, no, I didn't know that. You ask why? Well, what do you seek? You seek things that you don't think you have, right? And so we have thought that we're not realized. We have thought that we are not God. We have thought that I am not complete. We have thought that I am not pure. I am not whole. And that has caused us to go on this incredible quest in the only place we can go on a quest, in a mind where the world is constantly changing in an unrepeating flow. And in that world of constant change, we're looking for stability. When you state it like it is, it becomes the absurdity that it is. That in this world of a constant flow of unrepeating change, you're trying to find stability, trying to find a home, trying to find peace, trying to find inner strength, trying to find a place to stand up. You can't do it. That's that whole reason Jesus tells that story, about the foolish man who builds his house on the sand, right? And then the winds blow and whatnot, and it blows the house down. Why? Because he's trying to build in this world of the senses, trying to build a house, a home, a place to be in a world that has nothing to do with him, a world that he can't even fit into, that he had to create a thought of himself to enter. He said, instead what? Build it on the rock. What's the rock? Christians will say, oh, it's Jesus. Well, yes, Jesus is a good symbol for that rock, a great symbol for that rock. But the rock is that in you which does not change, right? That which in you, that has always been you, regardless of the condition of your body or the condition of your mind, right? If we were really the mind, we'd never have an idea of what we were. My goodness, the mind comes up with 1,000 ideas in a moment, right? It's all over the place. So it can't hold anything for you. It can't embrace you. It can't give you meaning. It can't give you strength. It can give you distraction, but that's it. That's why Thakur says, take refuge only in me, because it's the thought of God alone, the awareness of presence alone within you that will heal you, because Satchitananda is self-fixing, self-repairing, right? And so when you see a problem, when you're sitting there in your meditation and you're trying to do your realization for yourself, right? And you're looking around at all of these things that are going on. You're like, look at that mind is so noisy. How do I fix it? Right? Well, just by noticing it, you've already begun the repair, right? Swami Prabhupada put it in a wonderful phrase. He says, the knots of Maya untie themselves in the light of awareness. So this is why we sit and observe our nature, observe the world, observe our inner self. You have to go inside and be infinitely aware of what it means to be a body, right? You have to go into your inner world. You have to suss out that boundary. How does body talk to me? How does body communicate with me? And you find that you have to be communicated to. If you were the body, you wouldn't have to be. But the body has to tell you when it's sick. And for all of us, that's a different thing. For me, it's a funny taste in the back of my throat and a weird pressure on the back of my eye. And then I'm like, oh God, tomorrow I'm going to be down, right? But the body has to tell you. And your mind has to present its thinking to you, right? And so you have to watch it and you have to be the observer of it. And all of this is going on right in front of you, and yet you believe yourself to be the body and you believe yourself to be the mind, even though they have to talk to you. And what's interesting about this is that the body and the mind talk to you in the same way that the cars passing by on the street are talking to you right now. They have to use the same interface to converse with you that your body and mind have to, right? That's the weird thing. You know what that implies? That you thinking your body stops here in an ever-expanding boundary is an absurdity. Everything out there in this external world is using the same interface that your body is using to talk to you. There's a wonderful power in that. Expand the boundary of your body to include everything that communicates with you, because it's all in your mind, right? All of this is right here. You're not over there, right? We're all right here in a universal mind. And we've all got this little ego, a thought of ourself, which actually, that's the only difference between God dreaming and us dreaming, right? When we're in the secondary state, we're already in a dream, deluded. When we dream, we become a particular in a new dream, where there's all kinds of others, because that's how we got into this one, that's how we go into that one. God is different in the fact that when he dreams, he's every single thing in that room. He's aware that I am all of this, all of these people. Right? And so we're at the first level dream right now, where God has become every single one of us in here, right? In our divine nature, and is running around in this dream, this imagined world, all the time being distracted from the silence of pure self. And when you can find that silent space in the shrine of the heart, that pure communion with your divine beloved, and you have separated from mind and you're no longer being interested in it because you realize it has nothing to do with you, and you're not interested in the body anymore, one, because it's fat and 60 and old and nobody else is, they're just waiting for you to die at this point. So you lose your interest in your body, right? And you come, and in that silence, suddenly you know what you are, but you will never be able to tell anyone, because what you know cannot be placed into the mind. What you know cannot be placed into this universe. Why? Because it is the container of this universe. In the same way that your body at night is the container of your dream, and that's the reason it cannot enter into that dream, right? And so this is the situation that we're in, and I did exactly what I thought I would do. We're not even a third of the way through what I wanted to talk about here, but I think it's a good place to stop, an acceptable place to stop. But today, when you sit, when you do your practice again today, open up. Imagine, if you must imagine, that you're already realized. And then just open up to what that infers. What does that mean? Right? And as you uncover those things that means, accept them. Don't reject them. Don't call them impossible. Don't call them otherworldly. Don't call them silly. Don't call yourself unworthy. Don't call yourself impure. Don't call yourself anything. Don't call yourself anything. In that silence, accept and open. And just keep accepting and opening. Accept, open, accept, open, accept, open. And just expand and expand and expand. And find within yourself that which you have always longed for. The fulfillment to every quest, to every desire. Right there within you. Not earned, not discovered, merely accepted. How? Through the grace of God. Through the contemplating of divine love. A love that can't exist in this world. A love that we've never seen and just can't even imagine. a love with no condition. And what's odd is that I find the biggest inhibitor is a fear that I have of trusting a love with no condition, because I'm convinced there's something wrong with me. I'm convinced there's something I have to do, something I have to be to realize God. And that's your indicator. You haven't opened your arms wide enough yet, so stretch some more. Accept the grace. Accept the moment as free and pure. Say to yourself always, I have never been born. I have never died. I'm ever free, ever pure, ever loved of God. And find in that yourself, your peace, and your home. All right, Jai Ma.
Any questions at this point? Yes. Just raise your hand.
So they just had to be told once. Yes.
I don't know if this is appropriate.
Oh, of course.
You quote, you quote St. Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And yet St. Paul is the one who basically said, you are separate from God. And the only way there is through Jesus Christ. And so he promoted separation. So I don't take his words with full value.
Okay. All right. You don't have to. Like we can find other teachers that say it in a different way. Yeah, he's not, well, of course, what to say, how to say it. Christianity can get you there. They're looking at the same thing that we are. And they're describing it in a very different way through different metaphors and different mythologies and different teachers and whatnot. And they've set up their structure in a certain way, because there is a level at which we observe ourselves separate from God. And so I think Paul just chose to start with where we are and said, okay, you think you're separate from God. Well, the way to overcome that is through Jesus, because he is the sacrifice to cover all the reasons your ego is going to come up with for why that can't be true. Right? And so through this faith in this Christ, you will be able to lay down all of your baggage long enough for your mind to go silent for a split second. And if you can just allow that to happen, that's all you need for the truth to fit in. Because when you see this truth, let me just describe something someone else described. That in that moment, when you see this truth, it will always be with you because it does not come through interpretation. Right now, when I'm talking to you, I'm having to take my thoughts and bundle them in these funny sounds coming out of this mouth. And then all I can give you are those funny sounds coming out of this mouth. And then you collect them through these funny looking things called ears. And then you have to recompile it all. You have to then apply all of what you think that word means and what memory that brings up and what thought that brought up. And you sort of, literally make some hodgepodge doll and say, is that what you said? Right? And of course, I can't see the doll you created, so I can't tell you. When you get a direct experience, everything that was put into the words comes with them. Everything is there, Everything is there. You gonna let me off easy? All right. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji, Jai Jesus, Jai Buddha, Jai Rama.